And welcome, everyone, to episode 2 of the Strife Sanctum podcast. My name is Citizen Strife. Last time we went over Final Fantasy 1. Kind of a basic gesture, kind of figure out what the podcast was going to sound like, how it was going to go about with my ideas and how I wanted to structure it. And it seemed like it was a first good success. I was able to not only put it on YouTube, where I got a lot of views on it and a lot of good feedback, but I was also able to put it on platforms like Anchor, Spotify, and Google Podcasts and the like. So hopefully things keep growing, things keep going up, and up, and people are interested in this. And of course, with different games will come different explorations into what I can and can't say. We'll go a little bit longer. The first episode ran about half an hour. I was kind of panicking because I had to redo it, or at least I thought I had to redo it, but it was honestly a good choice because I took a 50-minute video down to half an hour and still had the same amount of impact, I think, if not better. That said, today is going to be a little bit nicer because I'm bright and early, I'm refreshed. It's a lot colder outside. It's a Tuesday morning, which helps because I don't have to work on a Tuesday. As I was able to angle for days off now on Tuesdays, which is going to be my time every couple of weeks to get these podcasts out. So I do have a list of the podcasts we're going to do going forward. So in 2 weeks, we're going to do Tales of Berseria, aka my favorite one, aka the only one I could finish. And Super Mario RPG a month from now. So I did at least want to space things out. So we've got a couple of episodes. I try to get a couple of episodes in a row so I know what I'm going to do, especially with something like Tales, where I know I may want to get a guest. I know somebody in the Twitch realm who is a Tales aficionado way more than I am. If I'm able to track him down and I'm able to talk to him, and if I'm able to figure out how to do that, like a dual podcasting setup, we'll get that set up. Otherwise, it'll just be me talking about Tales of Berseria next time, Super Mario RPG about a month from now. But right now, as you can see on the title screen, it says Secret of Mana. And Mana, as a franchise, has gone through quite a bit of ups and downs. They're currently on an upswing, and a lot of that has to do with Secret of Mana in general. They started as Final Fantasy Adventure, but they quickly broke away from the Final Fantasy label and became their own thing. And while they're not Square Enix's most favored franchise, they're one of the more critical darlings, at least when they're on point. I will stress on point. When this first came out, this was a big deal because Final Fantasy had been doing turn-based RPGs, about 4 or 5 games in a row. This came out in 1993. So by that time, Final Fantasy was established, Dragon Quest was established. You have your people in your battle system, in your fighting, and you're stuck. Secret of Mana changes that. But it's not only about the battle system, it's about gorgeous visuals and gorgeous music that kind of transcend a boring plot and, well, some weird battle issues. And again, I do want to stress that this isn't going to be like a negative on this game. This is one of my top 10 favorite games to play. I don't know if I feel that same way anymore now that the remaster has come out and other games have come out and, pushed it aside. But when I was growing up, I knew that SQUARESOFT was special. I knew that their run of games from Final Fantasy IV to Final Fantasy X and, even X-2 to some extent were fun and engaging and happy. And, it felt like they had something special. And Secret of Mana embodies that. Secret of Mana embodies just, you have a plot, you have characters, but you have this world. And I think that's where the good points of Secret of Mana start is the world that they inhabit. Because as far as plot goes, Secret of Mana is very basic. And again, I will go with the plot structure, characters, into the battle system and everything else. And I think one of the reasons that I want to focus on the visuals as a pro when I get to them, especially now that they've been able to do a remake for the PS4, is the color scheme that the game has. The color palette that they used. A lot of pinks, a lot of bright blues, a lot of bright greens. It just feels lush. Even more so than a game like Zelda, which is its closest not competition, but you can definitely see the Zelda influence, at least in the gameplay, when we get to that. But Mana does something that other games don't do, and it feels like a storybook. And especially later on in the series, when they really dabble into that sort of thing, that storybook style, like you're playing like a children's book. The story itself is, basic and whatnot, and I think adults can get into it, but as a child, you see all these bright colors and all this movement and all these, like, fun characters, and you're just like, I want to play this. And even though there are some frustrations in it, Secret of Mana is amazing. So the plot is very simple. And if you note that I drink some water here and there, it's just because I don't know how long this is going to go. So if I start drinking some water, I'll go off mic for a second and then be right back. But the story involves Randy, a character, just a boy who was messing around with some friends on a waterfall. He falls off the waterfall, and then he gets called into this clearing, I suppose. Think of the whole Master Sword thing from Zelda. That's pretty much it. He pulls the sword from the stone, Excalibur, Master Sword, that sort of thing. When he does that, monsters appear! Oh no! But he's able to fight them off, even with a rusty sword. So he gets kicked out of the village because he brought this on himself, I guess, which isn't really fair because he was kind of driven towards it. Not possessed, but driven towards it. He doesn't know. But he was considered an outsider of his village, so he's left to his own devices. Thankfully, he is tasked with, oh, hey, go save the world. You have this sword, so go save it from an evil empire and all this crap. So it's simple. You've got a sword, you got a boy. Well, you got a boy and a sword, not a sword and a boy, though the sword is the main character, I guess. You have a boy, you have a sword, you have a world. Nothing fancy. The benefit of that is you don't need to worry about it. A lot of this is the exploration of that vivid, lush world and all of the cities and all of the characters that go around it. And there are some nice characters, too, because you do have Randy. The next character you meet is known as Prim. She's like an elven girl, princess sort of thing. I liken her to a Princess Jasmine type character, because you saw that a lot, and I think you saw that with, say, Chrono Trigger with Marl too. It's just, you see it once, you see it in 1,000 freaking times, but Prim's nice, even if she's a little, like, I think the remaster makes her way more annoying because... And I will talk about the remaster and how the PS4 adds and subtracts some things. Prim talks about someone a lot, and that's what her character is. She's a prim, proper, not princess, but noblewoman type. But the problem is she will not shut up about a boy. And unfortunately, that boy isn't Randy. So, sucks to be you, friend zone guy. So they go around for a little while, and she basically saves him from getting eaten and such. And they go to a dwarven cave. They find this little sprite thing. Think of a male fairy, but with like stubby legs and that sort of thing. He's like gnomish or dwarven, kind of small. And his name's Popoy. And he joins because he's lost his memory and he's obnoxious, but he's gifted, and the dwarves send him on his way, and those are your three main characters. When you're done with that, at least as far as the original game goes, like, all characterization stops. And it's kind of frustrating in a way because they are so distinct. Because Randy is the straight man, Prim is the jerky princess type, and Popoe is the. There's a lot that can be done, and they get some stuff here and there. But the original doesn't really go a lot into it. What the benefit of the Secret of Mana remaster on PS4 it is, whenever you go to save a game, you're treated to a dialogue of each character, all three of them, sitting at an inn and just talking about whatever's going on. It could be the dungeon they were just at, or the fight they just had, or the magic they just gained, or the people they met, and little cameos from the other characters can happen sometimes. Let's say Luca from the Water Palace, who is like the main maiden of the game, at least for the first part of it. So people can kind of intersperse themselves in these like little cutscenes, and you're given a little bit more background on them. Randy doesn't really get much because he's the dweeb. He doesn't do a whole lot. He's just there because I have the sword and I stab and I save the world. Prim will not shut up about a boy. That's what her characterization is, and that's really frustrating because I like her and I want to like her, but when all you do is talk about somebody else, it's like a friend at a party who says somebody's this amazing fucking person, and you meet him once or twice, but you don't really like see what the big deal is, other than, I mean, he's nice, but really? And then Popoe is just trying to make money, trying to make a buck. Maybe it's to get home. Maybe it's just because he's greedy. Maybe because he thinks that everybody's a slave to him and he's a jerk. I don't know. So you're not going to get the best characters out of Secret of Mana, but you still get some nice characters. And I think the three people are likable enough. Unfortunately, that doesn't translate well to the villains. Because as I've said, there's some side characters that help you along the way. There's nobody really super important. A couple characters come in and out, but they're your basic knights. And as I said, Luca was a nice little maiden in one of the temples, in one of the palaces. But other than that, you don't really get a lot of extra banter. And your main foils are just an evil empire with an evil guy with some evil dudes. And right around one of them is someone named Thanatos, and he's the main villain. Now, what he wants to do is separate from what the Empire wants to do. It's kind of like what Kafka does in Final Fantasy VI, where he's scheming to do his own thing despite being in an Emperor's position. So he's going around trying to get himself a new body. And wouldn't you know it, somebody Prim won't stop shutting up about. Some guy named Diluc is apparently the best boy in the planet and everything. Not Randy, no. Not the guy with the mana sword who could possibly kill you and you want to possess him. No, it's just some random soldier dude with a lot of power and virility and whatever. And But yes. So you got to stop Thanatos, but you got to stop the Empire. But the main thing about the game is you're going around the world and you're collecting mana seeds. It's not so much that you're trying to stop the Empire, because you're going to do it anyway, but you're trying to save the world by reviving magic and mana in general. Mana, I'll kind of go back and forth. I like mana, but sometimes I'll say mana, and I swear everybody does the same thing, so don't worry about it. Recovering the seeds is where the main plot really lies, because it's basic. You know what you're always going. You're always going somewhere. You're going to a new town, or you're going to a new setup, or you're going back around and you're fighting guys to save like new villains and save people from new villains and whatever. Or you're going to the Empire and sneaking in and going in there, and you're flying around the world and going to different palaces and doing these things. They're small, but they do a lot and giving you this visual flair. Every place is different. Every place feels different. And it really builds upon itself, and the benefit of the game is it's like 15 hours. Even in the remaster, it's like 15, 20 hours tops, because the battle system is so sleek. At least it would be without some mistakes. So now it would be time to go over said battle system. Now, this is some trivia I dug up. I don't know how true it is, but a guy who was working on Final Fantasy IV, I believe. So this was like 2 or 3 years before Mana was made. He was working on Final Fantasy IV, and they still had the turn-based battle systems up to 3. They tried adding in what's known as the active battle system, which is more like enemies will still fight in the field, but you're still pseudo turn-based. But it's like a quick moving bar. It's like a timer. It's like a time limit that you got to follow, and you got to make sure everything's working for you. And he noticed that, and he was like, "Well, no, we should be getting away from that. We had limitations in our hardware in the NES, but we should be able to do what, say, Zelda does or Mario does and go around the world and fight, like Super Mario, maybe not world, but 64 would eventually do, like free roaming kind of thing, especially Zelda, East, things like that, free roaming, a lot of like action RPGs. What he wanted was an action-based game. So that's what he made. He helped make Secret of Mana. So things like Kingdom Hearts, Zelda, you name it. A lot of turn-based RPGs still exist because Square was making them, but he wanted to make something quicker. Unfortunately, the issue with the battle system is what they tried to do was do this like menuing system. You had your normal attacks. Right, you could swing your sword, or you could swing your bow, or you could swing your weapons. The cool thing is you had weapons to use. But you also had magic. Later on, a little later in the game, maybe 15% of the way through the game, you get some magic, and you get to use them. And every little while, you get a different element based on a different spirit. And you could use fire, you could use water, you could use thunder. It's that sort of thing. Status magic, debuff magic, raise someone's attack power, it's that sort of thing. While it was very unique, later on, magic became such a crutch that it became slower because the magic you have to use takes a charge. You have to go into the menu and you have to use it. And the spirit would come out and then they'd fire the attack, which is a cool effect until you have to do it over and over and over. Same thing with melee attacks. In normal games, you just swing your sword and it does some damage, or you can charge it and it'll do more damage because they still use the RPG numbering system. If you try to swing too often, they have this weird mechanic where you'll miss all the time. So you have to wait to hit like 100 bar, hit 100% on a bar, then swing. So you'd swing every like 3 seconds. It's like a weird cooldown that would slow down the action a little bit. And eventually you'd get harder attacks to pull off, which would require this like charge, it's like a tractor beam charge sound effect. It's not so bad until you realize that the original was designed in such a way that those charge attacks were really where most of your damage came from. So it either became from leveling up magic or charge mechanics. And I will go over this more when the cons of the game present, because this is like the main issue. But the remaster, when I played it, for its faults, did something that I wanted. It made melee attacks viable. It made them stronger. It made them less likely to miss the attacker or the attacked. So you could at least, buff the character's main attack and not have to charge weapons and, use magic as a crutch. Because the best games, I find, give you a lot of tools, but they also make it so that each tool is viable in its own certain way. If you can't use melee attacks, what's the point? They're giving you this like little window to cool down an attack so you can hit hard. So they rebalanced it, and it makes it easier. It sure does, but it also makes bosses go super fast. But as a rule, you're able to attack faster, you're able to move better, you're just able to actually clear out a room way faster now, rather than waiting for the button to keep going, or for you to enter a menu screen, select your magic, wait for the magic to go, and then you blow the guy up. So it's not that the design was a bad thing. It's that the design as a constant mechanic, because you're constantly moving and you're not going from battle to battle, like you would in a transition screen. So you're always fighting 5 or 10 enemies on screen, and you have to fight the same ones the same way. You can see where that time investment would start to creep up on you and be like, why is this taking longer than it should? As opposed to Link just taking a hook shot and stab a guy. Here's a cane of Samaria, bonk a guy. Whatever, whatever weapon you've got, you got millions of different ideas. You have like 2 or 3 main mechanics, and they take longer than they should. But it's still a fun battle system because it still melds the RPG like number mechanics and inventory management alongside, it's a decent attempt at trying something new. And I don't know, I think the third game balanced it a little better, but it still took them the remaster to realize that charging up and using the menu screen, because your friend is the menu screen sometimes, and it becomes a little frustrating. So those are one of the cons, and we'll go back over that eventually. Let's see. Ah, yes. Something I did mention before was that there were 3 or 4 characters. So with each character, you get different roles, but you also get different weapons. So some weapons are the heavy weapons like axes and swords and, spears and stuff. Some of them are shorter weapons like gloves, and throwing weapons like ranged attacks like bows, and even javelins. You could throw javelins. For some reason, you don't have a stock of them. You just keep throwing them. One of the best things about the battle system is you can sometimes, not always, but sometimes get a status effect. And some of those are very potent. You can either put a guy to sleep after every attack. You can sometimes confuse them so they attack other party members or walk a different direction, so you're trying to go somewhere. You can paralyze them, and paralyzing in Secret of Mana is fun because, like I said, you charge the mechanic, and if you go in a higher charge, so you hit a guy with a dart, and this is like the 3rd or 4th weapon type, I think. And at 3rd or 4th level, you throw it to paralyze a guy. He's strapped to a balloon. This stupid, like, red balloon that he's right next to. And it just floats in the air, and then when the balloon pops, he can move again. If you go higher up and higher spells, or if you use the balloon spell, it's a bigger balloon, it's a longer paralysis effect, and it looks even more goofy, because it goes from the red balloon, it goes to a blue cat balloon. And the highest level one would be like a Moogle. Just this gigantic, like, white and yellow face. Just this dumb look on its face. This dumb looking balloon. And this enemy's just stuck. Because you're using melee attacks, those status effects add up super quick. So you can poison a guy, you can confuse a guy, you can paralyze a guy super quick, or you can buff stats, or you can do more damage to certain enemy types. Each weapon that you upgrade, and you get multiple upgrades per weapon, you can mix and match, and everybody can use their own weapon. And because you can use one character and the other people can use AI, or you have a 2-player game, or God forbid, all 3. I've seen this before in a couple of playthroughs. You could play all 3 as player characters. Everybody can get their own weapon and do their own thing. And you can stand in back and let your AI do the work and do all those nifty status effects. So there's a lot of variability in how you can mess around with some enemies depending on what their weaknesses are. And it's always fun. Another versatility is in how each character acts. Because even though their weapons and stuff are the same, the way they interact with the game is different. And it comes down to their AI programming. Randy is Link, basically. He stabs dudes. He fights dudes. He doesn't do anything else. They even make it a plot point. He's like, well, why don't I get magic? It's because you're the hero with the sword. It's stronger than whatever, you know. Suffice it to say that I'm guessing they were saying he's too stupid to use magic. Either way, he doesn't get to use magic. He just uses the mana sword, and it stabs and it hurts. To challenge that, to buff that, is Prim's effects are buffing the party and giving them unique status effects on their weapons, or making them stronger, or giving them elemental affinities based on it, or you can heal. She does get a few damage spells, but they tend to be very costly, so you don't want to like overdo it. And then Popoi is just, hey, I can smack a dude with magic. So he causes a giant rock slide or an earthquake, or he summons a lightning bolt to hit some guy in the face. You know, so you've got your hero, you've got your white mage, you got your black mage. Fairly simple, fairly easy to understand, and once you know that, you're kind of like, I can do that. Cool thing is if you're playing one player, they have this like grid mechanic where you can switch how often or how sensitive a character's programming is to using magic, or they can charge a weapon strike, or they can charge a magic use and be like, don't use your magic too much or go all out, and you know, vary it a little bit. I don't know how it works to you know, like a niche degree, like this bar means this, but in general it means how much do you want them to use magic versus attacks. If you want them to just help you in melee attacks, say you've got the status effect weapon that you're using, let them keep using status effects, because then you have a lot of people falling asleep and then you just walk past and be like, bye. Or if you just want to murder dudes with fire, you can murder dudes with fire. So that's really all you need to know with that. There we go. But I'll talk about the battle system later when we run things back down. More importantly, though, I want to get back to the game flow, because I don't think Mana is as good as it is without its music, without its visuals. I think that more than anything else is what Mana signifies, because Final Fantasy and Squaresoft in general is all about graphics. We know this. They've been like about graphics since 1997 because of Final Fantasy VII and how much money that made. But they were great at graphics even before that, and Secret of Mana was just gorgeous. But along with the great visuals, just this expansive, like the forest would be all these nice spring colors. Like they even have an area where it's like one area looks like a soft winter's doomsday scape of all the snow. Then you go to the next area, then it's the spring season, and there's all these like pink and purple and yellow flowers and trees and rabbits going everywhere, even though the rabbits are trying to kill you. So you go to the next place and you go to summer and it's a little more muted, but it's still bright and you're fighting a lot of fish. And then you go to the next place and it's all dead because it's autumn, and then back around to winter. Those little touches, and then every area has its own little like ambiance. Like a desert's going to look like a little bit more of a downtrodden area, but a nice little forest area or a bombastic looking city, they all look and feel weighty. Every place looks like it's supposed to look. It all looks vivid and colorful, and it's amazing, but it's also vivid because of the music that they have. And Mana, if nothing else, has had great music, especially those two like Secret of Mana games, Secret of Mana 1 and 2, or if you want to call it Seiken Densetsu 2 and 3, because that's the Japanese term. And then going on to, say, Legend of Mana, which I will talk about later, because the Legend of Mana Remastered, I think Legend of Mana deserves its own episode, honestly, so I will, because they've got a whole new franchise set up for Legend of Mana, so I'll go over that in its own thing. But suffice to say, the music is a real big selling point to the Mana franchise. And it starts with the opening theme. It starts with this just small, subtle piano, and it opens to like this field where Randy, Prim, and Popoi are standing near the mana tree, and it's just this opening bombast of fluttering arpeggios and pianos and just nice orchestral instrumentation. and it sets the tone. Another part of the game which I really enjoy is the desert and ice countries and the Empire. They all kind of go back to back to back. The desert has this like weird like Middle Eastern like meets Asian vibe to it with the drumming and the marimbas and like the cool thing about this game is it uses a lot of instrumentation you don't get a lot of. You get your pianos, you get your harps, you get your flutes, but you get stuff like marimbas and xylophones and all these like weird wood instruments and brass instruments that you don't hear. And of course, it's still in a MIDI format, but you can hear it in just the desert. You're walking the desert, and it's like this like just desolate sound. Then you go to the ice country, and it's just this womp 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 womp. It's just this weird like I don't know. It's like warbly like flute effect or something going on, and the song is like all reverb and just it gets you in the mood that you're like thinking about Christmas time or thinking about snow, because it's all about snow. You're in a country full of walrus people and Santa Claus and ice demons and ice castles and stuff, and it really sets the tone. And then you get to the Empire, and the Empire music is just this hustle and bustle, but it's just softer. Like, again, I like using the term bombastic, so you might hear me saying that. That's the best way I can describe it, because it's a loud. It gets you in the mood, because it starts off slow and then it just gets loud, and you just really feel where they're going for. It's not quite a bad sound. Like, you're in the Empire, but you're not like threatened by the Empire, because the Empire castle itself has its own theme, which is pretty good. You know, the typical Empire evil and whatever sound. The Empire itself, whenever you go to one of those cities, is just a nice hustle and bustle like city, because every other place has been these like little towns, and you finally go to these places with these giant buildings and giant houses and all this fun stuff, and it works. It just gets you into the mood, because you go from gathering mana seeds to fighting the Empire. Couple themes I like talking about, but don't really, now that I listen to them, are the boss themes. Specifically the main boss theme. Anybody who's heard it is this is going to be weird aside. If anybody knows the sonic drowning effect, and I'm sorry that I put that in your brain, think of that as a boss theme, right? Like it's just this endless, mindless drill in your head. I like the bosses, sort of. I like them in theory. I get what they were going for with the boss theme, but it's too much. Contrasted by the final boss themes. When you get to the end of the game and you're fighting Thanatos, or you're fighting the real final boss, which I'll not spoil too much. They're way more evocative. That was the term I was going for with the Empire theme. Evocative. Because you're on this journey, but you're ending this journey, so you have to fight this like giant evil thing, and this like chorus of like undead zombie guys are and you know just pounding like a chorus in your head, and it's just like it's like you're fighting the demon to end all demons. Like, I'm in this, and then you're fighting this final boss that is just wanting to wreck all of humanity, and it feels like a final boss theme. So then you remember all those times you're fighting against the sonic drowning theme, and you're like, why? So that is what it is, I suppose. That being said, though, I talked about the Empire and how they had these slow building bombastic themes. I don't think anything really caught me as great until you get not quite the end of the game. I'd say about 2 or 3 dungeons before that, you get to what's known as the Grand Palace, and it's only for like maybe 5 minutes. But you can look this up. It's known as the Dark Star. If you want to listen to any Secret of Mana theme, you either listen to the opening theme or you're listening to Dark Star, because those are my 2 favorite themes. And whether it's the remaster or the original, they really did a very good job of making the music feel epic. The epic buildup of shit is hit the fan. We are in serious mode. Get your game face on. It's like the Michael Jordan Chicago Bulls kind of vibe, right? Because they have the opening of the basketball thing, and you just like, nah, and it's just like it builds and builds and builds, and it's just a like 2 or 3 part song for like 2 or 3 minutes, but it gets you in that mindset that you're going to go down into this dungeon and just wreck their face, or they're going to beat the crap out of you. There are no second guessings. That's serious time. So, dotted around the game are these good themes. So, while not everything works, I find that enough of it works that you're in a good space. You're a good headspace every time you walk into an area. That you know that you're going to be treated to at least something memorable. Every song is at least memorable to some extent. And I would put Secret of Mana's soundtrack up there against some of the best that I've ever heard. Having said that, the Secret of Mana remaster, not so much. And I'm going to level with you. I like the Secret of Mana remaster to a point. Like I said, the Dark Star, the opening theme, the ice countries, the desert countries, all of those are fun and fine. But when you're playing the remaster, something I warn people about is the worst songs that they re-recorded, because they didn't like re-record them based on what the original sounded like. They had people messing around with different instrumentations and different styles, so they didn't have one concurrent producer making the adjustments, and it shows. Because for every good Dark Star bombastic moment or flying through the skies moment, you have this weird, like, EDM guff. Or, no, I don't know how I would describe it. It's like weird pseudo, like, pop guff that doesn't sound like drums or doesn't sound like... it's just this weird piercing sound effect that a couple of these songs go for. They try to go for dance numbers, and they just go for like these weird instrument changes. And the problem is that a lot of them are at the beginning or the end of the game too. Like those awesome themes at the end of the game, like the final boss theme's great, but the orchestral chorus of doom against Thanatos is done so badly. The final dungeon is terrible, and it's just like everything that I like is towards the middle of the game. So I like the desert countries. I like the ice countries. I like going around one of the worlds where you gotta meet some dork who's telling you, go here and get this other thing before I talk to you. Like you're climbing a mountain and you're going through space, and it sounds like I don't know, a sex phone call. Anyway, so stuff like that. It changes and it feels nice, but you have to go through like 4 or 5 hours of these terrible loop sounds and these... Yeah, it's just... They went for a stylistic change and it didn't pan out the way I was hoping it would. Can you consider... I was such a fan of that original soundtrack that you messed up half of it. It really does wreck the game flow. Much less than Prim talking about dialogue every 5 fucking seconds. Much less than the game crashing on you every room. And they do have autosave, so it's not the worst thing. But the game crashes on you. And even then, I'd still say I'd rather have the music be better than the game crashing all the time, because you can at least avoid game crashes. So the remaster set a bad example. Thankfully, Legend of Mana's remaster, while it wasn't perfect, was better made. But you can see how coming off 25 years as a 7 or 8 year old boy to a 30-year-old adult and trying to pick apart what was going right and what was going wrong with a new version of the game that I played since growing up. You can see why I had to weigh my praise for the game against utter despair of why would you do such a thing. So if you do want to play the Secret of Mana Remastered, there are things to benefit from. I mean, you do get voice acting on most occasions, and it's fine. It's not, Persona or some of the later Final Fantasy games in terms of voice quality, but it's not like Saturday morning cartoon or 90s anime level shit. It's just kind of there. It is weird that the people's mouths don't move during cutscenes, but that's its own thing. So take it for what it's worth. It's easier to access the game, to access the game from a PS4. But if you can get access to the original from, say, the SNES Classic, I would do that instead. You get a different experience, and I think you'll enjoy both. But again, the music carries the game, and I think overall the original has the edge there. So this is where we got to talk about some of the old stuff that I did enjoy and didn't enjoy. Let me get a drink first. So I do like to try and get at least 2 or 3 positives and 2 or 3 negatives. Since I was on the negative side, I do think that worked better for me last week, talking about the bad stuff first, but then getting to the good stuff later to end people on a happier note. So that's what I will do here. Let me just check the time here. Okay, so as I figured, this is going a little longer than the original. I kind of figured that. There's a lot more to go into with Secret of Mana, and I guarantee you there's going to be a lot more to talk about with Tales of Berseria, or maybe even Super Mario RPG. These are going to be longer, but I hope that these aren't too strenuous of listens. That's always a fear. When I talk about the characters themselves, there isn't much to talk about. Once you see them, once you meet them, you know what they are. They're the hero, they're the prim princess, they're the annoying character, they're the happy-go-lucky knight who's trying to, be stern, but he's also trying to help you and be nice, the goody two-shoes. And then you've got the Empire. What are they gonna do? Well, they're gonna do evil Empire bullshit. Even Thanatos is like his whole thing. I will talk about it now, so spoiler warning for the next minute or so. His motivation is he's dying, but he needs to craft himself a new body, and he picks dialogue. But after that, it's just like, okay, so you're telling me he goes through the rigmarole of betraying all the people he was in with the Empire just to get a body. Okay, cool, whatever. It's not the most exciting of plots. So that's the end of the spoiler warning, just in case. So even the main character or the main villain don't get a whole lot to go after. So Mana benefits from other things in the game. They don't benefit from the bosses. I talked about Thanatos for a second. At least he's a different boss. He's this gigantic just bedazzling evil dude with fire and bones and robes and all this crazy crap. Or you get this giant Naga lady with 7 or 8 arms that's trying to turn you into a Moogle or whatever. But almost everybody else is a palette swap boss, and I hate that. I hate the fact that in a game this good, their mechanic for giving you higher level items and weapons was to have you fight 50 different bosses, but a lot of them are doubled up. So you fight the first enemy in the game, first gigantic boss is this gigantic ant with these sickle arms and stuff. You fight him midway through the game. One of the Empire's dorks rides a motorcycle. You fight him 3 times. He doesn't change at all. He's on the same stupid motorcycle in a different. All it is a different environment in a different area. Even enemies you think are super special end up showing up as just these like mini bosses later on. You get to fight with these 3 dragons or these 3 giant dwarf dudes, and it's like, give me that killer watermelon dude from the palace that I talked about. Give me those people at least look different. Thanatos, he's a big demon and he's trying to grab me from underneath the floor. It's like, he's trying to kill me. That's cool. But you're giving me a fight I've already had with a battle system that I'm already starting to get frustrated with, because we'll talk about number 2 is the battle charging, is the menuing. Every time you're trying to menu through the game, you're trying to waste your 5 or 10 seconds casting a spell or charging a weapon. I said that the remaster does one thing well, and that's making melee attacks more viable so that the battles go a lot quicker. If you still want to go through the magic and charge mechanics, you can, but a lot of the time, you have to keep leveling your skills so that they get stronger. But the best way to do that is just park your ass in an inn and go to the nearest area and then fight. And fight a lot and blow up a lot of dudes and every spell. So you got like 8 or 9 weapons and 8 or 9 elemental spells. So everybody's got to level everything they want. And it gets old. So as much as I like Secret of Mana, the one thing that really starts to kill it is when you're near the end of the game and you're like, hey, I want to level up all I got to level up everything. Even if you want to level up stuff as you get them, you're just like, oh, I'm going to stay at the end and I'm going to take an hour to get this all leveled up. It's not the hardest game at all, but the game flow should be a lot faster because of how it's designed. But unfortunately, the battle system and menu design leave a lot to be desired, and it slows the pace down. I guarantee you a 10-hour game turns into like a 15-hour game just by fighting and leveling up some of your stuff. Because levels don't mean a whole lot. It's mostly armor and weapons and some levels, but also your magic skills. In the remaster, you can get away with it somewhat, but in the original, if you don't have good magic skill or you don't have good charge techniques, you're pretty much up shit creek. So it is what it is. Take it or leave it. And so you can hear my frustration a little bit. But even with that, there's still so much to like about the game. And I spoke earlier about how it slows the game down. It's because the game is meant to be a quick experience. The game is like Chrono Trigger. It's like 10 hours, 15 hours. There's like no real downtime. You're going to a place and you're not stopping to fight a dude every 5 seconds in a battle transition like a turn-based game. You're fighting through an area like a Zelda game, and you're just going, hacking and slashing and going through a thing, and you're fighting this area. You go to the next one, you find a new character, you find a new mana seed, and you got to go to this next place. It's very non-linear and also gives you enough of a backing to know where you gotta go, but at the same time you can kind of change it up and go back to a place if you want to backtrack. The initial like 4 or 5 hour stretch is a lot of backtracking in the same woodland area, but they give you a lot of ways to get around that, so you don't have to keep backtracking the normal way. One of the coolest things about Secret of Mana is their fast travel system. Because early on in the game, the best way you can travel is by jumping into a cannon, as in a cannon, and being shot halfway across the woodland area. Or, if you need to go to the ice country or the desert country, they'll shoot you halfway across the world in a cannon, and you survive somehow. And then you go about your business. But after that, once you're done with that, your airship. Because Final Fantasy has airships. What does Mana have? Oh, a giant dragon called Flammy. Nothing special, just this gigantic white dragon who's the cutest fucking thing, just hauling you from place to place. It's just great. And the visual of seeing Flammy and he's just carrying you everywhere. He's just the nicest boy. But yeah. So you're able to go wherever you want. You're able to do what you want. You're able to see what you want at the pace that you want when the battle system allows you to. And then I spoke before about the colors. God, the color scheme of this game is so good. I could spend. Just, you look at a screenshot of Secret of Mana, whether it's the remaster or especially the original with its sprite work. I can't tell you that Four Seasons area I told you before, with all the changing color schemes to befit the seasons, that alone is spectacular. But every like mana palace is color coded based on its specific master. So a fireplace would all be red and kind of dark green and blue. A thunder place would have a little bit of muted whites and some purples, but a dark place would have a lot of dark purples and black color scheme. And like the Grand Palace, where I told you the Dark Star thing was later into the game, every like mana seed place is color coded to the specific masters. You get these like little color nuance things. You go on this desert tour to the Moon Palace, and it's just this kaleidoscope area. It's like an illusion. It's like an observatory kind of thing where all the lights and sounds and moons and stars are all swirling around you, and you don't know what the hell's going on. But you're also traveling through this like crazy purple haze abyss. This guy is ferrying you across to the palace, and it's just this giant desert ends up turning into nothingness. This gigantic orange desert that you've been just crossing all freaking day, and then you cross this endless purple abyss to go to this crazy ass palace. Those little touches in the game give you this sense of color, give you this sense of wonder, give you this, like, you don't know what you're going to see next because you don't know what the enemy's going to look like. You don't know what the boss is going to look like. You don't know what color scheme they're going to use, just to trick you. And even like the building structure, the places you go around are really well fleshed out for 1993 standards. And if nothing else, it's an experience. And I've said before, whether you want to play Secret of Mana, the original, on the SNES or SNES Classic, or the PS4 remaster, or a remaster on other platforms, you're going to be given an experience that you don't get from another Final Fantasy game, because it's not trying to be a Final Fantasy game. It's not trying to be Dragon Quest. It's not trying to be Zelda. It's trying to be kind of a mix of both. So if you want a game with the fun, free-flowing melee combat of a Zelda, of a Kingdom Hearts, of a thing, but you want like the sheer bombastic and colorful spectacle of a Final Fantasy game, Mana would be right up your alley. And Secret of Mana specifically, you can play the third game. I think it's now known as Trials of Mana. That is the benefit of the Mana series, is they're finally getting re-releases, and their quality kind of leaves a little bit to be desired, but it's still an experience. It's still such a good thing to play. Secret of Mana does have its faults, yes. Trials of Mana does too. Legend of Mana as well. But all three of those games I would put up there with some of the better Final Fantasy games, because they do so much stuff well that even those little issues are just issues. You'll get past them, and then you'll get to the next area with the next piece of music or the next enemy you fight, and you're like, oh, I'm happy again. Because that's what the game is trying to get you in the mindset of, a feeling of wonder, a feeling of excitement, but being happy to experience it rather than feeling bad that you're going through it. So that was my review of Secret of Mana. It's not perfect by any means, but the fact that the franchise is back on its feet and getting some publicity again is something that, as a fan of it growing up, I am so happy about. And hopefully, whether you've played it, like I have, maybe 10 or 15 different times, if you've never played it before, but you were interested in playing it, and maybe this gave you something to think about or something to see when you do first play it, or if it turned you off the game. The benefit of these reviews is that this can kind of act as a way for you to understand a game on a basic level, but sometimes if I'm able to talk at length without gushing with praise or being too negative. Again, I've stated from week one, I didn't want to be too negative. There are things that I have to be negative about, but I do want to become a place where it's analytical, but a positive place. And nothing about Mana as a game makes me feel negative to the point where I didn't want to play it anymore. So if you want to play it, I would highly suggest it. If you know somebody who has it or can give you a copy, or you just want to see it on the PSN store, or you just want to watch a YouTube playthrough or a Twitch stream of it, do it. You will not be disappointed. But that's it from me. I feel that this went quite a bit longer than the first episode did, but there was a lot more to talk about, and I do feel a lot more comfortable doing these like early morning podcasts. I'm ready to go. I'm feeling good. Hopefully the energy helped everybody else feel good whenever you want to listen to this. Again, I'm going to put this primarily on a YouTube format, but it's also going to be on Anchor, on Spotify, on those platforms. So if you just want to listen to it on any of those, feel free. 2 weeks from today will be Tales of Berseria. If I can finagle a guest, we will try and get that done in a couple of weeks. Otherwise, it will be on a Tuesday. Let's see. I think it's the 24th. Yeah, so August 24th will be Tales of Berseria, and then starting in September, we will do Super Mario RPG. So, not Final Fantasy and Squaresoft Overload. We get a change of pace, and then we get back into it. So I'm going to bounce around a little bit so we don't have to deal with the same games over and over and over. I think that's going to be a good thing going forward. But, again, hopefully this podcast was good experience. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, or just tell me what you feel, how it went. If I need to shorten it up, or if I need to be more expressive, or if I just need to dial it down a little bit and be a little bit more analytical, and I can do that. This is for people to see and experience a game in a different way from a person who does have the experience but isn't like some expert, I guess, because there is no way to be an expert at anything, I don't think. But I am a fan. More than anything, I am a fan of this genre. So if this helps you decide in any way if you wanted to play this game or any of the others that I am going to do, then I feel that I've done something special and important. So that's it from Citizen Strife. See you guys next time.